Welcome to Worthy Mother podcast. Today we are going to be talking about self-worth and reinvention in motherhood. This is something that we all need to hear regularly, right? How we can kind of tap into who we are, who we're meant to be, and what we actually want out of life because there are constantly opportunities to kind of make changes, change our mind on what we want, do things differently, and it's so easy to kind of get stuck in just what's happening automatically when we are deep in the chaos of motherhood, which we all know can be the reality at times. Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. So joining us for this conversation is Jenn Johnson. Jenn is a passionate life coach dedicated to empowering women to build confidence, set boundaries, and live authentically fulfilling lives. She believes that every woman has the power to create a life that excites and fulfills them, even you. And she is here to guide them every step of the way. So, Jenn, welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. Right before we hit record, I was saying I'm so excited to see where this conversation goes because
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a big topic that I think
Yeah.
can be hard to kind of like quantify, kind of make concise because we're
Mhm.
talking about like our lives here and how
Right.
complex they are. So it's just so excited. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us about the work you do. Give us a
Sure.
little introduction to Jenn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And, for so much of my life, I was a single mom. And so I love being able to participate in platforms like this because if there's the single moms that are out there listening, like they get it. It's so easy. I feel like it's easy for any mom to put themselves on the back burner. It's easy for any mom to make their kid their whole world. And I feel like with single moms, it's even easier to do it because there's that hyper independence too. And so I love being a part of platforms like this. So I'm just really grateful. So thank you so much. So yeah, my name is Jenn Johnson. I am 45 years young, and I still sometimes have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I think I'm 35. And I'm fine with that too. I have a 10-year-old son who is just the coolest kid. He is the sweetest boy. I love him to death. He is a soccer star. Soccer season's just around the corner here, so we're getting ready for that. I have been married for 2 years. I met the love of my life later in life. And so we just celebrated our second anniversary. And let's see, I have a long history of assorted jobs. Anything from like the restaurant industry to the bar industry. I was a nanny for many years. And when my son was born, I actually stepped into a sales and marketing role and was doing that for several years. And it was such a good job, especially like I was a single mom. I had no college education. It was one of those jobs that just really looked good on paper. My ability to provide, right? Having the 401k, having the insurance, having the sick time, having the vacation time, having all of that, the bonuses, it was perfect. And I thought my life was set. Like I thought this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to retire here. And the problem is I don't like sales. I don't like selling people, right? And so um while I'm so grateful for that experience and for that job because it was exactly what I needed at that time in my life, it was not what I wanted to do with my life. I
Mhm.
knew that there was more purpose for my life. And so when I stepped into coaching, I definitely found it. And so I know that that's why I'm so passionate about supporting women and creating these authentically fulfilling lives. Like I have a former client who worked for a huge company like that everybody knows, and she was making, $500,000 a year, and she walked away from it all because she's like, this is draining me.
Yeah.
This is actually making me miserable. I don't like the version of myself that I have to be to show up here. And quite frankly, the money's not worth it anymore. My life is no longer negotiable here. And it gives me goosebumps even now just thinking about that because and you kind of touched on this earlier, it's so easy for us just to fall into patterns. It's so easy for us just to do what we should be doing. At 18 years old, we go to college and we're expected to know what we want to do for the rest of our lives. Like, I think that I look back at that now and I'm like, wow, what a scam that like we pigeonholed these kids into what the rest of their life would look like. And so I love that at 40 years old, I just turned mine around and that I get to help people do it too. Because just because you at 18 years old decided that you wanted to be an accountant doesn't mean that you still have to be an accountant. Because actually, if you want to go be an author or an interior designer or whatever else it is, like please go do that and like give me a call because I'm happy to help you get there. I hope I
Yeah,
answered the question that you were just asking.
absolutely. I mean, I feel like it is so inspiring. Like that's the word that's coming to mind when you can listen to somebody's life and how it's changed at these time, like, quote, later than we
Yeah.
expect
No.
things to change. You think about
Yes.
being a kid or a teenager, and I know for me, like I was doing everything right. I was
Mhm.
following the path, I was getting the straight A's, like trying to please people. And just thinking about where my life would be, it's like, well,
Mhm.
obviously, I'm going to do the rest of it right too. And I'm going to get the job and I'm going to have the career and all
Yeah.
these things. And my life, I just turned 30 in the fall.
Mhm.
So, and like, I'm having the crisis of like, oh my gosh, like I'm 30 and like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
life should be all figured out. And oh boy, is it not, right? Like,
Right?
I already have left a career in teaching where I got a master's degree and was
Yes.
set to do that and realizing, oh my God, I cannot trap myself in this career. So I left, I pieced out. I'm now going through a divorce, have two kids. Like, this is not what I thought my life would look like at
Right.
30. And yet, I'm also, because of all this work I've done to really tap into who I am, is that hard to kind of navigate? Yes. But I
Mhm.
also see so much opportunity and so much potential and so much room to like keep growing up
Yeah.
because we don't just stop growing up at 18. We don't just stop growing up at 20. We don't just stop growing up at 25. And I think for so many of us, we get that messaging a little bit of like, oh, by 25 your brain's fully developed. Okay, so you probably have life figured out by then, right?
Sure.
Well,
Right.
no, and like there's no stop to when it can just be figured out. You can continually change and evolve. Maybe not, but that opportunity is always there. And so I just
Mhm.
think for anyone listening, knowing that if there's any amount of like unfulfilledness or dissatisfaction in life, first of all,
Mhm.
there's no shame in that. That
Right.
makes sense. Being
Right.
stagnant and where we are in life doesn't have to be
Mm-mm.
the only option. There are so
Right.
many options for you, even if it doesn't necessarily, like, you don't know what those options are, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
I love all of
That's
this.
it too. Like, also, even if you don't know,
Yeah.
because like, how exciting is that? It's like, I know there's something else out there for me. I know that this stir in my heart, I know that this like fire in my belly, that it's for something.
Hmm.
And how exciting that you get to like co-create with the universe or with God or with spirit or whatever your higher power is and figure out what that is. I mean, that's so exciting, whether you're doing it at 18 or whether you're doing it at 30 or whether you're doing it at 40, because you also
Hmm.
don't stop learning at 45 either, just so everybody knows. I don't think you ever stop, you
Yeah.
know? And it's such
Yeah.
an exciting opportunity. Is it scary? Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's scary. It was 100% scary for me to walk away from my career, to take a part-time job and to go back to school as a single mother. And I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had no idea how I was going to pay my bills, but I just trusted this calling on my heart is here for a reason. And so I'm going to move. I'm just going to keep taking steps forward. And, you know, it's almost like I'm thinking of like almost like a paver, right? Or like the yellow brick road. That's the image that's coming to my mind. It was just like brick by brick, that
Yeah.
path was laid out before me. And now we're here and we're still going, right? I mean, I hit a couple of pit stops along the way, but I'm still going. I'm still on my way to my Emerald City. It's going to be real fancy. It'll probably be pink though.
I love it. Well, I noticed we both have hot pink nails
I
right now.
noticed
If
that
you're
too. I was
watching
like,
on
I think our
YouTube.
nails match.
It's the vibe. It's a hot pink
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
morning. It's a Wednesday, so I guess on Wednesday We wear pink
We're
nails.
green. I
I love it. Okay, all of this, I mean, this alone, I'm like, okay, episode's done, amazing. But no, there's so much more to jump into.
Yes.
I want to know from you because
Mhm.
obviously this podcast is called Worthy Mother Podcast. We talk a lot about worthiness, we talk a lot about self-worth. It's also kind of this elusive thing that I think is kind of hard to wrap your mind around what it means. So I'm
Mhm.
curious just to hear in your words, what does worthiness mean to you specifically in motherhood?
Oh, that's so good. I think worthiness for me is loving all the parts that make me me. And even those parts that like maybe aren't so great, loving yourself enough to like address it and take it on, right? So maybe that shows up like in your health. Like, okay, I don't love the size that I'm in right now. I don't love that, but I am choosing to love me enough to I want to restate that. Choosing to love yourself enough in the skin that you're in and loving yourself enough to take care of yourself, to eat nutritious foods, to move your body, to drink the water, you know, because there's always going to be things about us that we don't love, right? But it's what are we choosing to do with it? Are we using it to take ourselves out? Are we using it to punish ourselves? Or are we using it to grow, to make the changes that perhaps eliminate that thought or lessen that thought? And I think that with motherhood, it's also knowing that just because you're a mom, your life doesn't get put on hold. E- Just because you're a mom doesn't mean you can't still have that career that you want or that you can't still take those dream vacations that you want. And I think it's so easy for moms. We step into this role, right? When we create this human being and they give us that baby for the first time, it's like everything else falls away except for that little baby. And while you know, that could last for a period of time, right? You can't spend the next 18 years of your life being solely dedicated and focused to that kid. And I just say kid because like I have one or to your children. Because one, like that's a real heavy burden to place on them.
Yeah.
Like your happiness relies on them. Like that's a burden no kid should have to carry. And I love that my son is watching me for his entire life, has been watching me change my life into the life that I always dreamed that I would have. And I love that, 5 years ago, we were living in a tiny little garden apartment, like with no room, and we were living on very little money, and now we're to a place where we're preparing to buy a house. And like, I just got to take him to Disney. My husband and I just took him to Disney for Christmas. Like, I love that he got to watch that because he now knows he never has to settle. Because, yes, if he goes to college and he does go into, I don't know, business management or something like that, and then 10 years down the road, he's like, you know what? That's not actually what I want to do. I want to be a teacher or I want to be a soccer coach or whatever it is. He knows that there's a path forward. And I love that he sees that and then my niece sees that and the people just around me, because when we step into those places and spaces, we give permission to those around us watching to do the same thing. And and I think that that was a really long-winded way for me to answer that question. But like worthiness and motherhood is knowing that you actually matter more than your kid. And I say that because it's like what they say on the airplanes, right? Put your own oxygen mask on first. Well, they say that because if you are not taken care of, if you crash out on the airplane, then you can't take care of your kid. So here's your kid with the oxygen mask on and mom's passed out and they don't know what the heck to do.
Yeah.
We have to make ourselves a priority. We have to put ourselves first. And then I'm going to rock your all the married people's worlds right now when I say, and then you have to put your marriage even before that. Because at the end of the day, your kid's going to go away someday and he's going to go. I say he because mine, right? My son's going to go away. He's going to go away to college. He's going to get a career. He's going to get married and have kids and all of that. And he, of course, he'll always be my son, but he's going to be gone. But the two people that I still have to live with are myself and my husband. And I don't want to look back and say, well, I just gave the last 18 years of my life away. Now, who am I and who is this guy sitting
Yeah.
next to me?
Yeah.
So I know that that's a super unpopular opinion, both, right? My kid is my why, my kids come first, there's that saying like, of course you would die for your kid, but would you live for them?
Yeah.
And I think that the answer for many moms is no, they're actually not living for them.
Yeah. Okay. There is so much in there that I want to get into. And I want to say, like, agree completely with that. That is
Mhm,
something that I speak about a lot is like
mhm.
prioritizing ourselves. Like, we have to come first in a lot of ways. That does not mean you would not do anything for your child. Like, that is a different conversation. But
Yes.
putting ourselves and our needs first most of the time
Mhm.
is actually really important. So I want to for sure get into that. But there was something
Yep.
you were talking about there about loving ourselves. And I think this idea of self-love can be really complicated because there are so many things that we may struggle with about ourselves
Mhm.
that we don't love about ourselves.
Sure.
And we're not going to solve that all right now in this podcast episode, but I think the way you were speaking to that just kind of sheds a light on why I think a lot of people are almost resistant to self-love or why it's so hard
Mhm.
is because it's like, well, I don't necessarily love and even accept all of myself, and I don't even necessarily want to accept those things. Like, I don't like them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
loving ourselves does not mean we have to like love everything about ourselves in that way.
Right.
It's loving ourselves enough to say, like, I'm worthy of my love and care, whatever that looks like. If that looks like putting in work to make change and, you
Mhm.
know, get better at whatever it is that I want to get better. I don't like the way I react to things and I want to change that. And I love myself enough to change that. And I think it's
Yes.
hard because we're just using the word love. We're using the word love in these two different ways, and it's two different things that we're talking about.
Mhm.
I want to like highlight that because I think the way you stated everything within that captured it really well. That it's like that's why it's so complex, but like we're all worthy of that. And if we can get to
Yeah.
a place where we know that like we are worthy of our own care, we're worthy of our own like attention,
Mhm.
it makes a huge difference. And then we can start to accept and love the little parts of us too, right? But it's like
Yeah.
it's not just about those things. It's about like
Yeah.
this, I know I'm worth it.
Well, and I love how you said worthy of the attention. And I think that that really just encompasses the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is I'm worthy of the attention, whatever that looks like, right? If that is I don't like how reactive I am and so I'm going to work on that. Or I don't like how I take things so personally when it didn't have anything to do with me, so I'm going to work on that. Or whatever that thing in you that maybe you're like, no, I don't love that about me. Love yourself enough to give yourself that attention. I think that was just such a beautiful way to say that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we stop to think about that very much in
No.
motherhood because it's like, first of all, usually we're focused on our kids. That's just kind of
Mhm.
the general
Mhm.
consensus, the universal way of being.
Yeah.
But also, it's like, it's hard to think about loving ourselves and prioritizing ourselves when, like, most of us did grow up to not put ourselves first just from the start. So, like,
Yeah.
why would
Yeah.
we then, once we have a child that's like the most important piece of our life that, like, literally you would die for it. Like you would do anything for your child.
Right.
So now you're telling me to put myself first. Like I wasn't putting myself first before that. So like
Right.
talking about, but it's really like it can be for them. It
Yes,
doesn't have to be for
absolutely.
them, but like you can put
Yeah.
yourself first. It's the best way to benefit them. So like, I mean,
Mhm.
take it that way if you need to.
Yeah.
I I
Yeah.
think this idea of moms putting their own desires and dreams on the side, or even their like ability to have desires and dreams, because I think oftentimes we talk about like, oh, I let go of the dream to have kids, but I actually think that what's more realistic. And of course, this would probably depend on when somebody has kids and what their life looked like before that. But it's like a lot of times it's like, I just knew I wanted kids. So there weren't other
Yeah,
desires and dreams. And I don't even know how, like, I don't have desires and dreams. I don't know.
right,
But I'm
right.
not fulfilled with this. And then that just feels crappy because you're like, well, this is what I wanted. There's nothing else. What are your thoughts on that? Like, why that may happen? And then what can we do about that to start having
Sure.
those dreams and desires?
Yeah. I think part of the reason that we're not present to those dreams and desires, a big thing is time, is we don't give ourselves the time. You know, it's so easy to, be like, oh, I feel really unhappy and unfulfilled in my career right now. And then just like turn around and shake it off because you're like, well, but I got to make money. So I guess I'm just going to deal with it. Right. Like, we either don't give ourselves the time and space or we justify why it doesn't matter and we're stuck there anyways, versus being in the excitement and the possibility of, if I could wave a magic wand and do anything, what would it be right now? And then when you come up with that answer, like, maybe that's not entirely it, right? Because like when I went back to school, I went back to school for social work, and I was working towards like chemical dependency counseling. And that is not even where I am, right? Like that, I actually, that's not a population that I serve. It is not my career. Like, it has nothing to do with like what I'm doing now, but it was a step in the right direction because all I knew at that time was that I wanted to help people.
Hmm.
And so I just followed that path and followed that path. And then eventually it brought me back to here. But I think that it's so important just to give yourself that permission and give yourself that space and time to be really curious. And quite frankly, that's why people like me have a job because, we don't give ourselves that time and space. We don't allow ourselves to dream because we're too attached to the repercussions of, if I left that paycheck, if I left that job, if I were left that relationship. We're too attached to like the repercussions of it, when the reality is we should be attached to the, what if I left that job? What if I left that relationship? What if I really allowed myself to dream? What if there was no wrong answer and I could just have and be and do whatever I wanted without any repercussions? Like, what would that be? That's a pretty exciting place to be in. We let our children do it. In fact, we encourage them to do it. And when do you ever look at your child and say, that's nice, honey, but you're probably never going to be a ballerina? Or that's really nice, sweetie, but Robert Downey Jr., he's already Iron Man, so you can't be, right? You never, ever, ever look at your child or your nieces and nephews or your grandchildren or the children in your life that you love and say, you actually can't be that. Now, I'm 6 foot tall. And when I wanted to be a horse jockey, when I was in my probably tween years, somebody did have to tell me that I was probably never going to be a horse jockey because I'm just not physically built for that. But, you know, all joking aside, we would never do that to your child, to our children. So why are we doing it to ourselves? And I always use this as an example. It's like, think of the things that you're saying to yourself. And now pick up a picture of your child or look at your child and imagine that you're saying those things to them, because you would be a monster if you did.
Hmm.
And so, why would it ever be okay for you to turn around and say those things to yourself or to crush those dreams for yourself? You are the example to them. You are teaching your children about how they can be, do, and have whatever they want in life. And so, if you're choosing to settle now, if you're choosing to succumb to all your excuses and all your stories, well, guess what they're probably going to do? They're probably going to learn to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, I really, really challenge people when they are in those stuck places. Like, you don't have to stay there. There is literally nothing keeping you other than yourself. And choosing to stay there is actually going to be more difficult for you than choosing to move. than choosing to move forward, than choosing to dream, to choosing to explore. We're really just making it harder on ourselves. And, there's holy mackerel, personal development, books, podcasts, coaches, seminars, workshops, retreats. There is not a lack of resources out there. And if you're truly stuck with them, like, please feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to steer you in a direction. And I'm not going to pitch you because there's so many resources out there and so many that are free
Mhm.
that you don't really have to stay in this place.
Yeah. Well, and you're here listening to this podcast, and I think that's an important thing to
Mm-hmm.
point out is like you're doing the work. You are allowing yourself to see that there's
Exactly.
more to you than being a mom, and there's more
Yeah.
to you than like your exact position you're in right now because we are having these conversations and you're showing up for these conversations. I want to share just a little like part of my background because when you're saying all of that, I'm like, this is why I quit teaching. Like what
Mm-hmm.
you said right there. And I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say it in a way that I'm like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. But I don't know that I've shared this on the podcast this way. But like in my personal life, when people ask why I left teaching and they're like, oh yeah, because the kids are hard, right? The kids and the parents are hard. And I'm like, no, actually, my last year teaching, I had a group of students who they weren't that hard and they were like really incredible kids who I had these great connections with, loved my
Yeah.
students. I also was burning out with
Mm-hmm.
all of the expectations. It was just after COVID. We had just come back from, distance learning and things like that. And I was really upset with kind of the politics of teaching and felt like I was being exploited for my labor because if I didn't put in work outside of my work hours, I wasn't prepared for the day. All of these things, so many other little pieces to that conversation. The reason that I knew I had to leave the job was because I was getting up in front of my students every day and I was working with minority populations and kids who come from like a lot of them came from low socioeconomic families, families who don't speak English. They are, when we think about like privilege, they're lower on the rung of like where they're starting off.
Sure. Sure.
But I'm getting up there and empowering them every day of like, you can do whatever you want in life while I'm feeling completely exploited for my own labor as somebody who has had all the opportunities in the world, right?
Right.
And the cognitive dissonance of getting up every day and trying to do that while also feeling like I'm not being true to that in any way, shape, or form. Like I've just kind of slid into a career that was like a, quote, stable career, although teachers are let go all the time. Like, how stable is it?
Sure. Sure.
But all these things of like, I'm not living up to the things that I'm trying to tell my students.
Right.
The same goes for your kids. If you don't want your kid to like leave college, get into a career that's like drowning them, right? They're like, so,
Right.
because we know that that happens. We know that those
Right.
jobs exist and there's a lot of them. We know that those relationships exist. We know that there are so many things in this world that our kids can grow up and just get kind of caught up in and never get to like
Right.
live out their dreams that maybe right now at 8 years old, they have all these big ideas of what their life's going to
Right.
look like. If you would be sad to know that that was the way that their life was going to go, like does it make you a little bit sad if that's the way that your life has gone? And yes, you may feel stuck in that, but
Mm-hmm.
the truth of the matter is you're not. Even if there's factors that make it so that it's more complicated than just like leaving, which
Yes.
like for me it was very complicated leaving, but like I did it and I'm still building stuff back up, right? I'm still going
Mm-hmm.
through other transitions. It's not perfect. There's been times where I'm like, do I go back to the classroom? And then I'm like, just kidding.
Right.
There's a lot of
Right.
things I would do before that, but
Sure. Yeah.
I want to share that because I think it's like this is very real. These conversations are very real, and if you don't
Mhm.
bring awareness to it, you might just be living that pattern and not recognizing the impact that has on your own kids, and then the
Mhm.
impact it has on yourself and
Right.
your sense of worth when you're like not giving yourself what you would want for your kids. That does impact our sense of worth because
Hmm.
we're not worthy of it,
Absolutely.
and we
Absolutely.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned like going back like during a time of COVID too. And what it made me think of is, you know, for a long period of time, there was this conversation about, well, people just don't want to work anymore. And we're still in that conversation. And I'm like, listen, unemployment for like COVID, that's been done for years. Okay. That story's old and it's over. So like, let's go ahead and let that one go. People had to figure something else out because they lost their jobs. And so they stepped into something different because they had no safety net. There was nothing there, right? Like, I'm going to go back to my old job. I'm going to go back to teaching. They didn't have that. And so, with no safety net, they just went and did the thing where they could make the money. And a lot of them, it was, it was selling their gifts, it was selling their talents, it was, the tangible products that they make, it's the services that they offer, right? Like, what a gift that was to so many people too. And I
Mhm.
know that that's not what your point was, but walk you don't have to walk away without a safety net like I did, right? Like, it sounds like you took more of a risk too, like the people who lost their jobs during the COVID shutdown. You don't have to walk away without a safety net. You can work up to it. You can step into this business or whatever it is, whether it's a career change, whether you want to start your own business. Like, I have a friend who's also a coach, and she stayed in her corporate job until she replaced 50% of her income. Once she'd replaced 50% of her income, she stepped away and went full time, and she's crushing it. I'm actually like, I see her sometimes and I'm like, I'm a little jealous because she was like, I'm in Hawaii for a corporate retreat. And I'm like, how'd you do that? Tell me more about that. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that you just walk away from the $500,000 a year career,
Yeah.
but it does mean take a step. Like,
Yeah.
let's make a plan. Let's take a step. Let's just listen to the podcast, read the book, explore this new career option or explore whatever it is. Let's just start talking about it.
Yeah.
Because the second we open the door to it, we open up our minds and we open up our hearts, it's like, God and the universe, they start conspiring with us.
Yeah.
My sister always says the universe is my sugar daddy. Because whatever she's like, I need, like, this girl could manifest money like something you wouldn't believe. But whenever she's like, she was one of those people, like, she was in childcare when COVID happened and she lost her job because they could only keep X amount of employees, X amount of kids in the facility at one time. So she's one of those people that lost her job and then turned around and used it to her advantage and went back to school and, has started her own business venture and all those things. But whenever she didn't know how the next month's rent was going to be paid, something happened. The money came, the opportunity came, a job came, something always came because she was open to it. She was willing to receive it. And I think that when we just put our body in that motion, like, there's so much goodness out there that's just waiting for us. And I have another girlfriend, and she's always says, like, how does it get better than this? And I'm like, I don't know, but let's find out, like,
Yeah.
what if that was your mantra in life? How does it get better than this?
Yeah.
And then just wait and find out. Like, that's pretty fun. I really
Yeah.
love that.
As you're saying all that, I'm reminded of a clip I saw just the other day, and I've talked about like Gen Z here on the podcast and just like
Mhm.
how interesting it is as millennials kind of watching what Gen Z is doing as they're coming up through the
Yeah.
workforce. But I saw a clip just about how, you know, people who are now entering the workforce who are Gen Z, they have so many options and they don't feel like they have to give their whole lives to careers like that. They're like, wait, I saw my parents did that and like they're not happy, you know, now in their late 50s or whatever. Like they're not happy. So like I have other things I could try. Why would I go into that? And I
Right.
think it's first of all cool that we are seeing the impacts, I think, of what millennials have gone through to now Gen Z.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of making those choices from the get-go more, you know, obviously
Yeah.
not everybody, but it's like that's also open for us just because we're a little older, right? Like
Hmm.
we also get to continue to choose and like it is cool like how generationally it can change. Like we will have an impact on our kids' generation. Like
Right.
that's really neat. But we can also have the impact right now and we can have an impact on the people around us because,
Mhm.
you know, if you walk away from a career, if you choose to start a business, if you like whatever it is, there's so many things. Other people see like, oh, I don't have to stay stagnant in this. Like you did
Right.
this at my age or
Right.
you did this later in life and like look at you thriving in this way. How amazing. Like I want that for me and
Mhm.
maybe that is a possibility. So I think that's really cool. Like we can see it happening and
Yeah.
also be part of it.
Well, and like I look at, so I'm a Gen Xer, and so I look at, right, my parents were the boomers. And so the boomers were like, women, you can have any career that you want. not only any career I think it was more you can have a career. And then it was you can have any career you want, right? And so I love how we can see the impact because, the like the millennials and the Gen Z, like those are my generations, those are our babies, right? And so it's like they're seeing what we did and the impact that it had. And so I love that you shared that too, because, just like we've touched on this a couple of times, like people are watching you.
Yeah.
Even when you think people aren't watching you, like they're watching you. There's somebody out there that you're inspiring, and they may not be saying anything, and they may not be liking your post on social media, but they're watching you. And you may never know the impact that you had on them, and that's okay. Yes, is it great when you know the impact that you've had? 100%. And you may never know.
Yeah.
But I know I cannot tell you how many single moms had said, "Thank you so much for being transparent about your story because it let me know that I could do it too." But then there was that single mom for me too, who was raising two kids and went back and got her master's degree. So it's like we're
Mhm.
watching each other and we are just permission giving missiles, like when we choose it and when we step into it. And it's such a gift truly to give to one another. It really is such a gift.
Yeah, I love that sentiment. What would you say to a mom who maybe is feeling like, damn, how did I get here? I'm feeling kind of stuck.
Mhm.
What do I do next?
Yeah. I would say beside your children, because that's such an easy answer, what is it that makes your heart sing? What is it that stirs a fire in your soul? Like, I would really invite them to be really curious. And here's the thing, don't say, I don't know. Don't say, I don't know. I don't know is such a cop out. You cannot know in that moment, you know, and it's something that I want to sit with. Ooh, I'm not sure in this moment, but I get to sit with that. But the second we don't say, I don't know, we shut it down. We disconnect from the thought process, we disconnect from our heart, like we disconnect from all of it the second we say, I don't know. And any of my clients that are listening to this are laughing right now because whenever they say, I don't know, I like interrupt it. And I'm like, yes, you do.
Hmm.
And your choice to continue to say, I don't know, is a cop out and it's a defense mechanism. And it's how you're keeping yourself stuck.
Yeah.
So just don't say, I don't know. Allow yourself to be curious. Allow yourself to be in the silence. Allow yourself to be in the discomfort. Allow yourself to be in the wonder. And allow those things to begin to bubble up because they will, but you have to open the door and you have to not have any barriers there because you can open the door and then I don't know and set up a barrier. So that would be where I would go is like, how can you give yourself the most opportunity to be the most curious, to really lean all the way into like childlike curiosity and wonder? Because if you ask a 5-year-old, like, what do you think you want to do next tomorrow? Because you can't ask them for the rest of their lives. What do you think you want to do tomorrow? You know, and probably it's going to involve a craft or some yummy food or a play date or going to the park or going, to the swimming pool. Like they are not going to have any, they're not going to have any difficulties telling you what they want to do. So it's like tapping back in to that, that little girl inside, that little boy inside, that childlike wonder, like tap all of the way into that. And again, there's tons of resources to help you do that if that's just something that you really feel stuck in.
Hmm.
Because for those who tend to operate for a more logical, analytical side of their brain, that is going to be a little bit more challenging. I just hosted a retreat for a handful of my clients, and we were focusing a lot on like what they want to create over the course of the next year, but then getting to like the root of the why, like what's the core desire behind that goal. And some of them were like more of that analytical thing. And so I had this workbook that I created for them and I put coloring pages in it and I brought markers and I brought coloring pencils and crayons and all of it because when they got stuck in that analytical side of their brain, they needed to shift to the creative side of their brain. And it was so fun to watch them like all of a sudden just be like, okay, I need to take a little bit of a break. And then they just like reach for the markers and they're just coloring. And it was so fun. But they tapped back into that
Hmm.
creativity, that kind of like childlike curiosity. And so finding ways that you can do that too. And also, if you're listening to the Worthy Mother podcast, you're probably a mom. Ask your child, they will teach you. Go play with your kid. Just go ask them, like, what do you want to do? You may end up in a tutu. You may end up in a tea party. You may end up with a cape. You may end up at a trampoline park. That's happened to me many a times. Jumping into the foam pit. I feel like I'm going to get stuck in there. They're going to have to come get me out. But they'll teach you how to tap into that. They'll teach you how to play. And that's where you're going to find the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
It's not going to be up here. It's not going to be in your brain. It's going to be in your heart. And it's going to be in all those places that we have closed down and shut down the older we've gotten, the experiences we've had that have caused us to close those doors.
Yeah. I think there's kind of a permission or a grace in there of like if it's hard for you to do that, like this is why. Like it's hard
Yeah.
because you have shut those things down. We've been taught to be more analytical, like all these things. So just knowing that like that challenge, that difficulty, that step to overcome doesn't mean you're incapable of it. And I think just knowing that can make it easier than to take that first step of like, okay, I have to open that back up. And like that is going to take work, not, necessarily like hard work, but like it does take work to tap back into
Yeah.
that. It takes intentionality. And so give yourself the space to do that, even if it feels hard. It's important.
Yes. And also, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like, you're not alone in this. You are not the only one. As a matter of fact, you're probably the majority than the minority.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm here to tell you that 6, 7 years ago, when I really got to start stepping into that space of curiosity and what do I want, I was so stuck in I have to provide for my kid.
Hmm.
I was a single parent. I have to provide for my kid. Nobody else is paying my bills. Nobody else is paying my rent. Nobody else is paying his school fees and childcare fees. Like, I have to provide for my kid. So I'm super clear that it's easy to get stuck there. And I'm not saying that it isn't. Like, I'm actually hosting a retreat at Disney World later in the year for this exact reason, to help people tap into that kind of childlike wonder, to get out of where we've gotten stuck as adults. Yes, some of it is healing and some of it is because of wounds that we've experienced as a child, but some of it is because we have become so consumed with being an adult, with being a provider, with being a partner, with being a soccer mom, with right, all of those things. Like, we have just become so consumed with it that we cannot even let ourselves daydream anymore. And so, like, that's the whole purpose in this. And I'm like, what better place to trigger that than Disney World? There's no better place.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up the conversation, I always like to ask guests about self-care because, like we've talked about, it's so easy for
Mhm.
moms not to put themselves first, not to put their own
Yeah.
care first. And I think just bringing it back to like, how do we care for ourselves? What does that
Mhm.
look like is important. So, I'd love to just ask you how you care for yourself on a regular basis and if you have any advice for moms.
Sure. I would say I have so many opinions about self-care because I think that there's a lot of stigma around what it
Hmm.
should look like. Here's how I would say that I would self-care. I love getting my nails done and I love getting my lashes done, and they make me feel pretty. And it's dedicated time that I take for myself. It's dedicated money that I take for myself versus being like, oh, well, actually, my son needs new soccer cleats. No, that money is for me. That time is for me. That feeling, feeling pretty, feeling beautiful, like that is for me too. So this is where it's like, bubble baths and massages aren't necessarily self-care, but it's the intentionality behind it, right? Like, are you using it to check out, or is there something very intentional about it? So for me, it's about these things where I'm like, I'm pouring into, as somebody who's grown up with a lot of body image issues, pouring into something around my image is very healthy for me. As somebody who, grew up very poor and for many, many years was struggling, to spend money on myself is really a form of self-care for me, to spend that time and money on myself. I am a sun goddess. If the sun is out, I am outside in it. I live in Ohio, so we have all 4 seasons, unfortunately. But I am telling you what, as soon as that weather hits 60 degrees and sunny, I am outside. I am in the sun, and I say that like I'm a solar battery where I have to absorb the sun in the summertime and it gets me through the winter. That is just something that I need as somebody who struggles with seasonal depression. Being outside, being in the fresh air, being in the sun legitimately is taking care of my physical being. And I think that's something that's also really important. And this is something that's become very present in my life too. So I'm not going to stand here as the authority on this one, but it's something that's really present to me and that I'm really paying attention to and implementing into my life is building a solid foundation. And that can look a little bit different for everybody. So is it meditation? Is it exercise? Is it yoga? Is it journaling? Is it prayer? Is it scripture? Like whatever it is for you that's going to help you build a solid foundation each day. But then that also carries forward so that everything you are building on, when things start to crumble just a little bit, you didn't just destroy everything because you built everything on that solid foundation. And another thing that has like really become super present to me is also that can be through play because I don't like to go to the gym. The gym is not fun for me. I don't feel comfortable there. I don't like going early hours in the morning and it's just me and a whole bunch of men. Like I don't feel safe. There's nothing about the gym that I enjoy. But how do I want to exercise? How do I want to move my body? Because that's really fun too. I want to go do aerial aerobics. I want to go do yoga with goats. Like I want to, oh my gosh, I have a girlfriend that goes to drag queen cycling. And I'm like, I want to go do that. Like all the fun ways, right? That I can do these things that are taking care of me, that are building a solid foundation. It doesn't have to look like what it looks like for the other person. I cannot meditate because I have ADHD. And if it's before I've taken my medication, I can't focus on it. But I can, turn on YouTube and catch a free guided meditation by somebody that I love, right? So just also being in the curiosity of what does building a solid foundation look like for me? Because what's true for you is probably not true for me. And I think that that's so important for people to be really clear about too.
Yeah. I think you covered such a wide range of what it can look like to care for ourselves. And obviously there's so much more, but when you started there talking about nails and lashes,
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting conversation. And I mean, like, I love highlighting self-care and talking about self-care, but I
Yeah.
also like talking about how we talk about it as a society and what that
Mhm.
means and why it's such a weird thing to talk about for women and moms.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think sometimes we're like, it's not the getting your nails done, it's not the lashes, but I actually like I do my nails myself. I have like glue on, like they're press on glue on nails that are great and last me like 3 weeks. And I also
Yeah.
I started recently doing my lashes myself. Got like lash kits and learned how to do it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I can be kind of a hot mess. Showing up with my nails done and my lashes on, like waking up in the morning and not having to put makeup on because my lashes are done and like
Yes.
it's like, is it necessary? No. But do I feel a lot better going through my
Yes.
day with it?
Yes.
100%. And it's actually become like a really, really important part of self-care for me. It's not the action of doing it. Like I literally do it myself. It's not relaxing. It's kind of a quick thing that I do. But having it done has actually, like, it is kind of foundational to how I show up. Are there
Yep.
things underlying that where it's like maybe I don't need to, like, I don't need my lashes to feel good. I don't need my nails to feel good. Okay, yeah, maybe. But like it does make me feel better. It makes
Yes.
me feel more put together. It makes me
Yep.
feel more confident in how I'm presenting myself to the world. And like, hey, like let's like take it for what it is and say, great. And then there's all these other things too, right?
Yep.
Like that's not all that I do to care for myself, but it just gives me a little bit of a boost when I'm
Yep.
feeling good about myself in those ways. So
Totally.
I love that. And then I love how you're talking about other things like doing what works for you,
Hmm.
knowing
Hmm.
that like you might have to experiment with what's best for you too. Like
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine.
And I would say also like get a buddy and do it with them. Like I said that to my sister. My girlfriend recently just told me about this app. I think it's called ClassPass. I don't
Mhm.
know if they have this everywhere or not. Okay. And I would, so it's the opportunity for me to go try all these new things, right? That I haven't done, but I don't have to make like this big, huge commitment to it. And so I was talking to my sister about it, and I was like, do you want to go with me? Because I know for me that just walking into a new place can be a bit of a barrier for me,
Yeah.
especially in the health and fitness arena, because that's not my zone of genius, right? So that can be a barrier for me. So I'm like, let me just eliminate that barrier. So I'm taking a buddy with me so I don't have to walk in by myself. And that's a barrier that I eliminated. And now I can just get in the door.
I love that. And there's
Yeah.
so many ways if you're creative to eliminate those barriers for
Yeah.
yourself. So
100%.
super important. Jen, where can listeners find you, get in touch with you, and learn more about what you're doing?
Oh, goodness. So my website, JennJohnsonCoaching.com, is the best way. I have all my social media links on there so you can follow me on social media. I have my link tree on there so you can see everything that I'm up to right now, but it's also all on my website right now too. So that's the best place to find me. There is a place on there where you can just schedule a free connection call. Like if there's something that resonated with you today that you want to talk about, please schedule the call. It is free. I'm not going to pitch you. Like, you don't have to worry, about anything like that happening, because it just does truly matter to me. And so
Yeah.
I always want to provide that space for people too.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. I
Yeah.
feel, we're talking about like seeing other women doing the things and being inspired by that and how we all can be that person. But I just want to say, like, for me, looking at what you've done and just the way that you have continued to reinvent yourself and figure
Mhm.
out the new thing that's going to feel best in this season of life, it is really inspiring. And it does, being in a position where there's so much transition in my life, including
Yeah.
like entering life as a single mom, like it's
Mhm.
sometimes it does feel scary and like, what the heck am I doing? And so
Yeah.
you've provided like a great inspiration for me. And I'm sure for
Thank
anyone listening,
you.
there's parts of your story that resonate. And just
Mhm.
knowing that like we can do this. We have the choice to make changes at any point in our life, no matter how weird it might feel. So thank you for just showing up and sharing your
Yeah, of
story with
course.
us.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yes. And for everybody tuning in, I hope you are leaving this conversation just as inspired as I am. You are worthy, Mama.